Hello guys, welcome to Healing Hearts with Sarah. In today's episode we are going to talk about people pleasing and hyper independence and how that is often linked to childhood trauma. If you have ever thought it's okay, I'll do it myself, or I don't want to be a burden on anyone, then this video might hit home for you. So a lot of people think that hyper-independence means that you are strong and determined and can do everything yourself. And people will assume that people-pleasing means that you are kind. But these aren't necessarily personality traits. They are probably survival strategies that you've learned over the years. So to explain hyper-independence simply, it is not being able to, feeling that you're not able to rely on other people. And that will probably stem from having a childhood where you couldn't rely on other people. Relying on other people probably meant that you got let down. Very often or not, people will believe that asking for help is a sign of weakness or failure in some way. It actually isn't. I think it's the opposite. Being able to ask somebody for help because you know that you need the help, I think is probably the strongest thing that you can do. Admitting to yourself as well when you need the help, that's strength, that's not weakness. So you often find that people that are hyper independent struggle to ask for help. That'll be like the biggest main thing. And like I said, they'll feel like they're almost failing whenever they do ask for help. Another thing is feeling uncomfortable when somebody offers help. You know, have you ever been in a situation where you feel like you can do it all on your own, even though it's a little bit overwhelming, but then someone comes along and says, I'll help, and you're like, no, honestly, it's okay, I can do it myself. That is a sign of hyper independence. Knowing that you probably could do with their help, but having too much pride to be able to accept it. Telling people I'm not a charity. Have you ever heard that saying before? I know I've heard it in my life. I've heard people say, I'm not a charity case, I don't need the help. Sometimes you do need the help, and it's not shameful to ask for help. So you'll often find that a lot of the times it is definitely kind of saying to yourself, no, I've got this. And it's not that you don't want that connection with somebody else. It's just probably often or not in your childhood, you went through stages where you knew that asking for help was going to either backfire, you will get denied the help, or that it wasn't safe to ask for help. It's kind of when your nervous system realized very early on that asking for help wasn't safe. And sometimes this can show up in ways where you prioritize others' needs above your own. You kind of put yourself on the back burner. Say, for example, you've planned a night out with your friends. And it's been planned for ages, but then you get a phone call off a family member asking you to babysit, and you don't feel like you can say no. So even though you really wanted to go out and you're excited and it's been planned for ages, you will drop everything to go and babysit those kids because the family members asked you. That is prioritizing somebody else's feelings over your own. It's not selfish to say no. It's not selfish to say, I'm sorry, I have got plans. Can you get somebody else to do it? If anything, that is showing yourself that act of self-love, because you're putting your own needs first before somebody else's. And a lot of that people-pleasing and hyper-independence will boil down to the fact that you don't want to say no because you're scared of conflict. You don't want to disappoint that other person. But sometimes you have to, because the problem is if you let somebody rely on you constantly, when you do eventually start standing up for yourself, that they see it as you had a personality change. It's like, well, why are you saying no now? You always say yes. You know, sometimes you have to let other people down so they don't rely on you so often. And people pleasing isn't about being nice. It's about trying to keep yourself safe, because maybe that wasn't the case whenever you were younger. It's almost like self-abandonment, you know, just so you don't upset somebody else's feelings, you're going to upset your own instead. It looks like saying yes when really you want to say no. Or feeling responsible for other people's emotions. And the reason why you find a lot of this is usually linked to childhood trauma is because you would have felt things in your childhood that you've now brought along into your adult life. And it's hard to let go of them, especially because when you're a child, you are learning. Everything you are learning shapes you into the person you are today. But maybe you were neglected as a child. Maybe you felt like you didn't have a voice and you couldn't speak whenever things, you know, upset you. You didn't feel safe enough to share those emotions. Maybe you just had inconsistent parents. Now, I'm not putting the blame on anybody here, but if you had parents that one minute were very, very loving, the next minute were cold. I had a paranoid schizophrenic dad, so I definitely understand how that felt. I had a mom that would be loving in front of other people, but really cold behind closed doors. So that inconsistency in parenting, that definitely has a negative effect on you as an adult. And then another sign of it being linked to childhood trauma is having to grow up too fast. I know personally I was sexually abused from the age of 6 to the age of 16. So as you can imagine, I really did have to grow up too fast. I was also left looking after my little brothers. I was only young myself, but you know, at the age of 7, 8 years old, I'm having to change nappies and babysit and everything else. So growing up too fast definitely is something that gives you those people-pleasing strategies whenever you're older. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I'm not saying this to call you out. These were survival strategies that probably kept you alive, let's be honest. Then the hyper-independent side of that is you probably grew up realizing that help was never coming. It didn't matter whether you cried out, it didn't matter whether you spoke out, help wasn't coming. You had to deal with things on your own. And you probably only had yourself to be able to rely on. I know I felt like that growing up. I always said that I was in my head 90% of the time in my childhood because that's where I felt safe. I didn't speak out much. I kind of just kept myself to myself, and just the real thoughts were in my head. The real thoughts weren't what anybody else would have heard. I could only rely on myself. I was my teacher, I was my caregiver. I had to rely on myself for almost everything. And then the people-pleasing aspect of that comes from having conditional love. So only feeling loved when your behavior was good, when you had good behavior, for example. You know, and it kind of being conditioned. Like I said, my mom would be so lovely in front of other people, but then be cold as ice whenever the doors were closed. So my love was very conditional growing up. And the thing is if you built these strategies because of the childhood that you had, that's a very intelligent thing to do. For your childish brain to be able to understand these strategies, that's really, really intelligent. And like I said, like those strategies probably help save your life, and kind of the way our nervous system protects us by allowing us to become very hyper independent, become very people pleasing, because by keeping the peace, it meant that you were safe. And I'm not saying that it is a problem to be a people pleaser or hyper independent, but that the only issue with that is you don't give time for yourself. You're too busy thinking about everybody else that you don't give yourself the love and the time to heal properly. You might even find that this shows up as burnt out relationships in your adult life, feelings of not being able to trust people fully. Maybe you'll even end up attracting emotionally unavailable people, and that's not healthy in itself. You'll often find that you also struggle to accept love, that you feel like love always comes with conditions. You know, the why are they being so nice to me? Why are they being so loving? You know, what's going to happen? What are they going to expect in return? And then one of the things that I used to always say is feeling invisible, almost feeling like you don't matter, like the world doesn't see you. I felt invisible for a very long time in my life. And it's being in crowded rooms with people, but feeling like you're alone. Have you ever felt like that? You can have people around you all the time, but still feel alone. And that again stems from childhood trauma and not getting the love and the care that every child deserves. So it doesn't mean that you are broken. So I don't want you to think that. It doesn't mean that you're broken. It just means that your nervous system was working in a way to protect you. And I talk about that quite a lot, and we will touch on the nervous system and how it works in a later video. And I just want to reiterate, you are not broken. Those people-pleasing tendencies that you have and the hyper-independence, they have served you up until this point, but they're not going to continue serving you. At some point in your life, you are going to have to put yourself first. And that putting yourself first can start with just asking for little things, asking for help with little things, slowly learning to accept love and knowing that it doesn't come with conditions. I'm not saying that these things are going to change overnight. This is something that's going to take time, but slowly learning to adapt yourself and realize that you are now safe. You're allowed to speak out. You're allowed to say when something doesn't feel right or if you don't feel comfortable doing something. It's called setting boundaries. And if people have a problem with you setting boundaries, well, I'm not being funny, but they don't deserve to be in your life, because everybody should have a voice. Everybody should be listened to. And if you are surrounded with people that don't listen to you, maybe you need to find a new circle. And lastly, I would just like to say that it isn't about becoming selfish. Like, healing and putting yourself first is not selfish in any way. It is just putting yourself first. And you deserve that, especially after never feeling like that growing up. Healing's about giving yourself the love that you didn't have, about honouring the fact that you went without this for so long and you bloody deserve it now. So if that love starts with loving yourself, you can't really go wrong, can you? So I also, let me know in the comments which one you relate to more. Is it the hyper independence or the people pleasing, or maybe it's a bit of both? But let me know in the comments. And guys, as always, if you can like and subscribe, maybe leave a comment, that will help my channel grow. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you.